Hey, it's Noel Powell here from creationeffects.com, and today I'm talking about mixed media animations, or some people call it a collage animation or an analog animation. You've seen these before. They use a combination of different materials with writing or drawings right on the footage and a low frame rate to make some really creative stop motion videos. Well, if you were to look up a tutorial on how to do this, you'd find a bunch of videos that show how to print out every frame of the video onto paper, and then they physically draw or paint or scratch or add composite elements to each frame, and then they scan or photograph each frame and edit all the images together. It's an insane amount of work. So I'm going to show you a different method that uses Adobe After Effects, and it'll be a huge time saver. So all of these animations that you're watching now, I made using an After Effects template called Mixed Media Effect, and you can download it at creationeffects.com, and I'll put up a link in the description. This is an enormous collection of effects that you just copy and paste into your comp. And you can customize the effects with easy controls so that you can create an endless variety of looks. It's really a blend of real elements like paper and fabric and hand-drawn textures with procedural effects that are made in After Effects. And as you'll see in this tutorial, it has everything you need and more to make a really good-looking collage animation in very little time. So in this tutorial, I'm primarily just going to go through the entire template and show you all the different effects, or not show you all the effects because there's almost 1,000 of them, but show you all the categories of effects. You could do this yourself, but it'll take you a lot longer. I'm going to highlight all the stuff you need to be aware of, and I'll be explaining things along the way. Most of it is pretty straightforward though, and I have written instructions throughout the template as well if you need more explanation. And as I go through the effects, I'm going to be building a quick animation so you can see my process. Your process might look different, and that's totally fine. One thing I love about this effect is it's very forgiving. I would say it's even difficult to screw it up, because it's almost like the more you add and the more you mess up your footage, the better it looks. It's really a lot of fun, but enough yapping, let's get on with it. Alright, here's the zip file that you would download from the website. If you're on Windows, you can right-click it and look for the Extract All option. That's generally the safest way to open it so that you don't get that missing files error in After Effects. Or if you're on a Mac, you can just double-click. And then you see two projects. One is 4K, one is HD, and they're identical, except the 4K one has the comps for the animations in the demo video. So if you just want to drop in your footage and get a finished animation, you would open this one, and I'll show you that later on, but for now I'm going to open the HD version just because it'll be faster. And After Effects will want to convert it, that's normal. So the first thing you need to do is import some footage and drag it into this Your Footage Pre-Comp here. So I'll go to File and Import File, and I've got this clip of a girl dancing here. So I'll just drag that in there. That's going to let you preview all of the effects in the template with your footage. This is 4K footage, so I actually need to scale that down. Now, what I normally do with one long continuous shot like this is I like to edit it, just spice it up with some creative cuts, just anything I can think of to make it a little bit more interesting. And I don't think I need to show you how to do all of that. So I think I'll use the Mary Poppins method and snap. Hey, look at that. It's all done. You can try that method too if you want, but I doubt you'll be able to do it because you suck at magic. But let me play that back so you can see what I did. I just put some basic cuts and close-ups in there. Tried to be creative. This editing part is totally optional. If you want one long continuous shot, then that's totally okay. All right, next I'm going to go into this Your Mixed Media Animation comp, and I'll just play that back so you can see. This comp has some basic effects in here to get you started. You can remove the ones that you don't want. The idea is you're going to be copying and pasting effects, layers from the different comps in these folders, and putting them in here above the Your Footage layer to build your mixed media animation. And while I'm in here, before I start showing you the effects, I want to talk about just a few main principles or effects or techniques things. We'll call them things. Some things that you're going to encounter throughout the template. So it's a good idea to understand them now before we move on. First thing I want to talk about is frame rate, which is connected to the stop motion effect. You're going to want a low frame rate for your animation. I recommend anywhere between 4 and 10. Anything higher than that and the textures are going to move too quick and it's just not going to look good. So if I go to the composition settings, I'll do a Command K as a shortcut or Control K. We can see that this comp is 10 frames per second. That helps it preview faster and it gives it a choppy look. Actually, I have not been able to figure out any way to export or render at under 10 frames per second. If you set this to 5 frames per second, it's still gonna export at 10 frames per second. And anyway, what I usually like to do is have the clip play at a normal frame rate in that first second or so, and then transition into the mixed media effect. So I'm just gonna set this to a normal frame rate, like 30, or you can do 25, whatever you use. So now that choppy frame rate is going to come from this layer. If we look at the effects on there, you can see it's got a posterized time effect, setting the frame rate to 6. You can control that with this control here. And this is an adjustment layer, so it affects all the layers underneath it. So I'm going to move these first few effects over about a second. And this first part will play normally. Now you can see we've got some other controls here, these variation controls. And what these do is they move your footage around, and they scale it up a little bit, and they rotate it, they change the brightness a little bit on each frame. It's all random, and it's imitating that really crude, handcrafted style of taking photographs of each frame. And so you don't want everything to be lined up perfectly on every frame. And you can control the amount of variation that you want with these controls. All right, so now I've got this little horse doodle here, and you can see it's got its own stop motion controls. If I solo it with just the comp stop motion effect, you can see it's wiggling around. Even if I bring it above, I'll turn that off. It's still wiggling around, although it's going very fast, because in the controls we have match comp's frame rate checked. So it's playing at 30 frames per second. If we uncheck that, it'll play at 6. If you're going to be using something like this under the comp stop motion effect, just leave that checked. But you can set that layers variation, because if you were moving this element from frame to frame and placing it on a printout of your frames, it wouldn't be in the exact same position on each frame. It would move around. And also, if you were to animate this, I'll add a keyframe for the position there, and I'll go forward and bring it over there. And if I just solo that, let's uncheck that. You can see that the movement is not playing at a low frame rate, because our posterized time effect does not affect layer transform properties, these down here. So usually whenever you've got a layer like this, you want to animate its position or scale or rotation in this effect, this transform effect here. So I'm going to delete those keyframes, and instead I'll animate the position in the transform effect here. That's more what we're going for, but why would I have a horse in there? So I'll hide that for now. The next thing I want to talk about are animated textures. We're going to take a closer look at them later. They're all found in this animated textures folder. Here's an example of one. Just a bunch of dirt and marks that are overlaid over your footage. Here's another one. This is a canvas texture. No two frames are the same. It changes on every frame. And actually I can open that up and you can see it's blending multiple layers together, wiggling them around and overlaying on top of each other. These textures are used everywhere in this template, and you can swap them out. And that's the next thing I wanted to talk about. There's a technique for swapping out a source of a layer, and I want you to learn it because it's how you're going to try different effects and different textures. I'll go in this folder, and there's some grunge overlays. I'll just pick one. If you select a layer down here and then hold down the Alt or Option key, and then you can drag a texture into the comp. So that swaps it out. And these are light marks, so I would change the blending mode. I'll do Add. And I could swap out that canvas texture too if I wanted. There's a ton of paper textures in here. I'll choose a wrinkled white paper. And just one more thing, I'll unhide my goofy horse here. There's an effect I use a lot. It's the roughen edges effect. And it's how I get the torn paper edge look or frayed edges on fabric. You can increase the amount by adjusting this border property, and you can scale it down or up to get more detail. And to get the texture to change on every frame, I just have a simple expression on the random seed control. So if you ever want that rough edge texture to stop moving around, you can just turn off that expression. Or another way is to just set the frame rate to 0. All right, let's start working our way through these folders. This first one, all video and image files. Every image or video that's used, it can be found in here. There's not really much to say about it. I actually recommend that you just ignore this folder because it's better to copy and paste those elements from these folders here, because they're going to have the stop motion effect and the blending mode will be set and it'll just be ready to insert into your comp. All right, let's move on to, actually, I already started talking about animated textures, so let's just finish. There's about 120 animated textures in here, a variety of paper textures or pen and pencil or paint textures, fabric, clay, graffiti. So if you open one of those up, you can actually customize the texture using the control layer. Let me zoom out and we can see as I scrub through, you can see that the layers are all jumping around randomly and they're being blended together with different blending modes. You can choose how much they can jump around with this position wiggle. You can see random flipping is on, so they flip directions. You can turn on random rotation if you want. Random opacity, it'll make it lighter. And I could change the blending mode of these. So now it's much lighter and I could put this above my footage, just drag the whole comp in there and set like a darken or a multiply blending mode. There's really no end to the kind of looks you can achieve with these. And you can always swap out images as well. I showed you that technique. You would just go into the image files folder. All of the images in those animated textures are found in this folder here. You can see there's 160 or so images. So I could swap out one of those graffiti images with paint splatters. Then there's this optional effects layer. You can turn on the time warp effect, and that slows down the textures. And then also these lavender layers can be duplicated as many times as you need, and each new layer will have its own random behavior. Okay, let's move on to this Alter Your Footage folder. This folder is reserved for any effects that transform your footage or just change the look of your footage. We'll start with this Creation Artifacts looks. These are some of the presets taken from the Creation Artifacts template. That's another big template with lots of different looks for your footage that imitate different artistic mediums. So you can turn your footage into a Van Gogh painting or a pencil sketch. I chose some ones that seem to go well with this template. You've got a paper cutout option, animated painting, halftone print. You'll just have to go through them to see what you like the best. Let's just open one of these up. A few things to note about these. They're all going to have their own Your Footage comp here, so that you can use different footage with this effect if you want to. Also, to get the best results, you're going to want your footage to have good dynamic range, which means that the brightest parts of the footage are going to be pure white and the darkest parts will be pure black. And then overall, you don't want your footage to be too dark or too bright. So you can do that with a levels effect. Just apply a levels effect, and if there's any area on either side of this waveform that is blank, just bring those arrows in to where the wave starts. This footage looks pretty good actually. And you can also use this middle arrow to adjust the overall brightness. And once you open up one of those artifact comps, you've got a control layer at the top, and you'll see a ton of controls for customizing the look of the animation. I don't need to get into all of these. You can take your time and play with them. Also, there's an instructions layer at the top. You'll probably want to read that. Note the stop motion effect here. This one has the match comp's frame rate checked, so that would be 10 frames per second for this comp. And once you've customized it and you like the look of it, you can just drag that artifact comp into your mixed media animation. It's got your footage inside of it, so you don't want to move it side to side or it'll be out of sync. Just trim off the beginning and the end. So these presets are really cool. They use the animated textures, as you can see, and those are all made from images or scans of hand-drawn textures. So it looks very authentic, but there's also this option to create your own artifact. So let's look at that. If you open up the pre-comps folder, there are several pre-comps in there, and you just need to drag in any animated texture. So first we'll do these 3 texture pre-comps. There's a light, medium, and dark. Your animated texture doesn't necessarily have to be light or medium or dark. That might look better. You'll just have to experiment. So I'll go to my animated textures folder. That's down here. I'll go to this miscellaneous one. I'm just gonna pick some random ones. This old map can go in the light comp. Dyed fabric, let's just put that in the dark one. And aluminum foil, let's put that in medium. And then we need a paper texture as well. There's a bunch in this paper and canvas folder here. We'll do newsprint. Okay, let's see what it looks like. It's pretty crazy. You can always go to that control layer and tweak the settings to make it more recognizable or to adjust the colors or whatever you want. You can see there's a stroke in there or an outline. So you can use the outline controls to get more detail. That might help make it more recognizable. Okay, let's move on to color grading. There's a bunch of options in here, just layers that some of them really dramatically change the colors. Some of them are a bit more subtle. You can always combine layers to create something more bold. And when you find something you like, you just copy and paste it into your comp. And then just note that a lot of these use different blending modes. You can experiment with other blending modes to get different looks. Let me show you a nice trick you can use to cycle through blending modes. If you have the layer selected, you hold down Shift and then hit the plus key. It's just a quick way to go through the different blending modes and find something you like. Something like that, for most videos, that would be way too much. But for this, I think it kind of works. You don't have to be shy with the effects in this template. Really bold and dramatic is good, I think. Okay, let's open the copy and paste stylized looks comp. These are layers that you can copy and paste over your footage, kind of like the artifacts. They just give a really stylized look to your footage. And by the way, every comp with effects in this template is gonna kind of have this format of you'll have an instructions layer at the top, and you can just unhide that to see it better. And at the bottom, you'll have your footage, so that you can preview every effect with the footage. But also note that many layers are going to have these layer comments here. So these provide instructions for specific layers, or more tips, I should say. And to read that, you just have to widen the column a lot and then expand the layer. And usually you'll have to expand some of these other folders just to get the room you need to read it. But anyway, there's a lot of fun stuff in this comp. I really like this comp. 2 of these are unhidden by default because they go well together. It's kind of a newspaper halftone print look. Some of these are just really simple with just a couple effects, and then some of them are more complex and they've got customization controls on them. Some offer some creative layout options. And if you combine multiple layers, you can get some really interesting looks. I'll just copy a couple of these over to my comp. So the next one is a fun one, the paper stack collage folder. There's 4 presets, you can call them, in there. So I'll open up the first one. It just puts your footage on multiple pieces of paper with ripped edges. And you can go into the control layer and you can adjust everything about it. The torn edges, the shape of the paper. So some of these other ones, like here you've got long vertical streaks. Be sure to read that instructions layer at the top. And if you want to use one of them, you just drag it into your main comp. And it should be synced with your footage, so you just trim off the beginning and end where you want it. Alright, texture overlays. That's exactly what it sounds like. You just copy and paste them over your footage. Grain is in here. That's an important one. These yellow ones are all procedural, meaning they're made in After Effects. So they're going to have customization controls. These ones, what are they? Pink? I'm colorblind. Fuchsia. These ones are video files that are overlaid over your footage with a blending mode. And there's some really good stuff in here. If I solo it, you can see it better. So there's some film textures here, like film dust and hairs. There's some analog static, or glitches, or light leaks. Those can come in really handy. And then these green ones are animated textures, just like we've been looking at, but these ones already have a blending mode chosen, so they're ready to copy and paste over your footage. And I used a variety of blending modes here. I didn't necessarily choose them because they looked best, but because I wanted to show a lot of variety. So these are grouped by similarity. So up near the top, we've got dust and dirt. These ones in the middle are more patterns. And then we've got some more sketchy ones, or doodles, paper, and they just keep going and going. I'll just copy and paste a couple of them. And I originally thought I would edit the timing of all of these, but for the sake of time, I think I'll just do that later. And you can see I used that horse after all. I decided I kind of liked it. We'll move on to time effects now. There's just a few effects in here related to frame rate or time. The comp stop motion effect is here. It actually comes with this bottom paper texture as well. So copy them both if you need them. Sometimes I like to scale down the footage like that. And that's a common look for mixed media animations. There's also a layer stop motion effect. So if you've brought in your own element that maybe you scanned or something and you want that to be able to wiggle its position over your footage, you can just copy the controls and the effects and paste them to that layer. There's also this random jump cuts effect. That might be helpful if you've got one long continuous shot like this one was. Let's open transition effects. And in here we've got lots of these short layers. They each have this little layer marker on them that's labeled transition. So these would go into your comp and you move them and sync them up with a cut in your footage so that the cut lines up with that layer marker. And actually, if you're wanting to preview these in this comp, you might want to create a cut in your footage down here. These first three are animated textures, which means you can swap them out with any other animated texture. So you could use a different paper texture on here if you wanted to. Let me copy one of these into my comp. And I'll find a cut in my footage right there. So we just slide that over. And many of those transition effects have keyframes. If you hit the U key on your keyboard, it'll reveal the keyframes. And that'll be how you can extend or condense the duration of the effect. If I select all those keyframes and I hold down the Alt key or Option key, I could drag the last or the first to stretch them out like that. And just pay attention, note that this keyframe should be right at that transition marker. So after you stretch them, you'll want to move them over back like this and then extend the layer. If I go down further, these peach color ones are video textures, just simple flashy overlays. Probably the most complex one in here, and the one I like the best, is this paper hole transition. To get this into your comp, you would select this paper hole control layer and then shift select this last layer and then copy them all into your comp. And then what you'll need to do is unhide this layer, as it says in the comments, and unhide this layer too. And then leave this alpha matte layer hidden, and on your first clip in the transition, you're going to set the track matte to that alpha matte layer and extend that first clip so that it lasts for the duration of the effect. And then it needs another layer underneath it. That'll be your second shot. And that doesn't need to start until that layer marker. And one thing to remember about this one, since we have a track matte set up for this layer, if we go before the beginning of that alpha matte, then our footage disappears. So you just want to extend that to last for the duration of that first clip there. All right, if you're still with me, you deserve some kind of medal or something. I'm already starting to think, what the heck was I thinking? Thinking I can get through this whole template in a 30-minute video. But let's keep chipping away at it. Let's go to this composite physical materials folder. You can think of this as like any real world element, anything with a shadow that you want to put on top of the paper or your footage. So cutouts, magazine clippings, fabric, paper, tape, all that good stuff. Let's look in this backgrounds, borders, and design elements comp. All of these have the stop motion effect on them, so you can adjust how much they wiggle from frame to frame. And some of these are animated textures, like this paper border. So again, you can swap those out with any paper texture you like. So this is intended to be like a background. If you wanted to put some text up, there are text effects in the template, and you can put it over this rectangle if you wanted to. And to change the shape, you just edit the mask. And we've also got a lot of paper scraps. These can be used as backgrounds. Speech bubbles for your text. Just random rectangles that I found in magazines. All right, what's next? Collage materials along path. Let's hide those instructions. So all of these, you're going to see this same looping shape here. I don't expect you to use that. I expect you to edit the path on these layers. So if you select layer, you can see the path, and you can edit it with your pen tool up here. You can move vertices. If you click on the line, you can add a new vertex. If you alt or option click one of them, you can convert it to a corner. And if you want to extend the path, just click either the first or the last vertex and then click somewhere else. If you click and drag, you can make it a curve. So this is for if you want to create a stroke using a real world material like fabric or paper. That's what these effects are all about. So you can create underlines, or you can surround the subject in your footage with this and then animate the path to move with your footage. To do that, you would reveal the mask properties in here, and you keyframe the mask path. Go forward, move the path, and that adds another keyframe. Lots of paper options. And if you look at the controls on any of those layers, you can see you can adjust the width or the roughen edges amount. The roughen edges properties for each of these are different. So the paper has one kind of edge. The fabric has a different kind of edge. It's more like a frayed edge. So if you're swapping out the textures, it's best to use another fabric one on here. Okay, enough of that. Collage materials inside mask. And this one's similar, but instead of an open path, we've got a closed mask to create a shape. And you can create any shape you want. You can see that these have a specific shape, but you can edit the shapes to be whatever you want. If I use my selection tool here, I'll just select one of these, and then I can box select a whole bunch of them like this and delete them all at once. And then I can just work with what I got here to create whatever shape I want. You could use this to cover up an area of your footage. Like maybe you want the sky in your footage to be covered up with this pencil strokes, and then animate it to move with your footage. Let me show you one last thing in here. If we look at the stop motion controls for this layer, there's this control that says points position variation. And if you try and turn that up, it's not going to do anything by default. But what that's talking about is the position of these points. Because if you were to cut out or tear out a piece of foil like this multiple times and put them on each frame of footage, they would never be the same shape. But if we can make these points wiggle their position on each frame, that'll make it a lot more realistic. So to do that, and you'll find this on every layer that has a mask pretty much in this template. It's always going to be an option. You just got to reveal the mask path property here and expand it. And you'll see there's an expression in here. We just need to turn it on. You click this little equal sign icon, and you can see how that changed the shape. And of course, you can control how much variation you want from frame to frame. All right, let's open Effect Reference. I put this here because I figured people will probably be bringing in their own images or elements, and they might want to use some of the effects that I use on the elements throughout the template. So you can find some of those common effects in here, like the point wiggle that we just talked about, torn paper edge. If you've got a piece of paper you put in to your comp, you can just create a mask to create the shape that you want, and then copy the effects on this layer to give it a torn edge like this. Irregular shadows. The standard drop shadow effect in After Effects just gives a very even shadow, and if you've got like crumpled paper or something, that's just not very realistic. And so I was trying to think, how can I make a more realistic shadow? These are the kind of problems that keep me up at night because I'm a weirdo. But I came up with something using the Vegas effect, so you can see on each frame the shadow moves around, because usually you would use this on an animated texture and the crumpled paper would be changing shape on every frame. But there you go, and no one's going to use that. All right, let's go to this hand-drawn Doodle Cutouts comp. I searched my entire house and got every doodle I could find that my kids had made, and I've put them in here. They've got the stop motion effect on them. You just copy and paste them into your comp. They can convey a certain emotion or idea, and they just go well with the whole scrapbooking look. Remember, if you're animating a position of a layer like this, you don't want to use the layer's position property. You want to use the position property inside the transform effect and keyframe that. Magazine picture clippings. These are very similar to the Doodles, just various symbols and pictures. It's not a bad idea to go through all of these and the Doodle cutouts just so you know what you have to work with, so that like if you have footage of someone celebrating, you can put this party hat on them or this smiling mouth. All right, I opened up the 4K version of the project so that I can show you this folder that has all the comps from the animations that you saw in the demo video. And I already put the dancing girl footage in my comp here. So we can just open up this folder and you can look for the animation that you want to use. And so this was the clip of the rapper, or maybe he's singing. I'm sure, I don't know. So obviously this animation was designed for different footage, and there's going to be some layers that you'll want to delete and some other layers that you'll need to edit. But I think it still might save you some time. And I mean, if you saw a certain look in here that you really like, these can be a starting point to create your animation. All right, we got through that folder pretty quick. Let's move on to all the drawing, painting, and scratching options. In here, we've got a couple comps with animated doodles. Let's look at the customizable ones first. So these are all made in After Effects, so they're completely customizable. They all have customization controls on them. There's some expanding shapes here. You just edit the mask to surround your subject or whatever you want, and you get these radiating lines that move outward. And you can control the speed and everything. X's or circles. And then all the other ones below that are just different pictures. And they're all made from a mask. And then there's a stroke effect on the mask, and then a scribble effect to fill it in. And the scribble is going to change randomly on every frame. And then the position of the points are changing randomly on every frame because there is that expression on the mask path property. This time it's enabled by default, and you can control the amount of variation using the controls under the stop motion controls here. You can adjust the scribble, of course. You've got lots of different options in here. These are all specific pictures and symbols, but you can still edit the shapes. The important thing to note though, and I should have mentioned this before, you can only edit these paths. Right now it's not going to work. You can only do it when that expression is disabled. So I'll hit the M key twice to bring up the mask path property. And if I disable it, now I can change the shape of that mask. Just something to remember. Even I had trouble with that. I'd be trying to change the mask and wondering why it won't work. And I built the stupid thing. So it's really easy to forget. All right, so now these public domain doodles. These are really cool. They're all derived from public domain animations that I found online. So they're clear to use in your projects. You don't have to give attribution or anything. These are cool because they have a different look. They're all done by different artists, and there's quite a few in here. These are all set to loop continuously, but the layers are trimmed to play out their normal duration. So if you want them to loop, you just extend it like that. Let's open borders and frames. These first few titled layer border, they will surround the edge of any layer. You just have to tell it which layer you want it to surround. So right now my footage layer has a mask on it. And if you were to read the comments in here, it would tell you that after you copy and paste this into your comp, you'll need to tell it which layer to look at. So the way to do that is to go into this Vegas effect, just the first one, and input layer, you would set that to your footage or whatever layer you want that border to be around. And you've got different options like paint strokes. You can choose how many strokes you want. Okay, I'm going to delete that mask now, and we'll look at some of these other ones. We've got some borders made from pencil shading or pen strokes. So you can use these to highlight something or surround some text or whatever you want. All right, pretty much every mixed media animation that I've seen has drawing or painting on the footage, usually around the subject or the person. So we've got options for doing that. You can do that along a path that you draw and animate, or this first option automatically detects the contours or the edges of objects in your footage, and it draws along those. So let's look at those first. It's not going to be as precise as you want, probably, but there are some controls. If you look in the Effect Controls panel, you can adjust the threshold, and that'll shift the strokes to other areas of your footage. And these are messy. You can choose a different option if you want. You can control how many of these strokes you want to see. So if you just want one, you put that in there, and you can adjust the color and the width. And just the nice thing about these is that it's automatic. It'll just follow your footage. All right, let's look at drawing and painting inside of a mask. So basically it's just an animated texture. You can control the shape by editing the mask, and it puts a stroke around it, which you can customize. So you can cover up any area of your footage. You put this over someone's shirt, I don't know, and animate the mask path to move with that shirt. And again, there's going to be an expression on here, which you can enable if you want some variation in the position of the points. And of course, you can swap this out with any other texture you want. These are paint splatters. You can change the blending mode. Crayon. Marker. Let's look at that other option for drawing or painting. This one's along a path. And you can see our old swirly shape again here. These are actually shape layers. They're not solid layers. If you're not familiar with these, you should probably get familiar with them because they're pretty cool. If you open the contents section and then open path, you can access the path in there. There's no expression on it. If you want to wiggle the position of the path, you can do that in the controls with these wiggle path controls. And you can adjust the amount of detail. The really cool thing about shape paths is you can add effects to them. Anything from this menu here. And I've already got some on here, and you can control them with the controls. So like you can twist it. You could create a write-on effect, and I've got some examples of that in here. So you can look and see how I did that by keyframing some of these controls in the trim paths section here. Wave controls. This lets you create variation in the width of the stroke. And you can make it really wide like that. So now it's like it's written with a calligraphy pen or something. Pucker and bloat, you can do some interesting things with that. And roughen edges controls, that's how you get the texture to create paint or marker, chalk, pencil. The big difference between these are in the roughen edges properties. The really cool stuff though is down here. These brushstroke layers. These are much more realistic because they've got that streaky texture. that follows the path. And also you can overlap the stroke like this. They are a little bit slower to work with. And let me just show you really quick how these are made. If you go into the controls and look for this preview brush checkbox, we'll click that and then we can see what the brush texture looks like. You can see it moving along the path. And you can increase the size of that brush texture using the controls here. You can adjust the texture. And then the stroke is created by adding an echo effect. So as the brush texture moves along the path, it creates all these echoes and it leaves a trail. So there has to be some movement on that path to create the stroke. And you do that by keyframing the stroke completion control up here. And if we reduce the number of echoes and increase the echo time, you can see the individual echoes. But the effect has been optimized so that you don't need a whole lot of echoes, which makes it a lot faster. Anyway, you'll want to read the instructions if you're using this effect. There's some important information in there. Let's move on. Ooh, we're almost at the end. Scribbles, lines, and scratches. This is a good one. There's a lot of fun stuff in here. These first two are the only scratch effects in here. There's one that's heavy with scratches and one that's a little lighter. So the way I intended these to be used is you would duplicate it as many times as you need and then move and rotate and scale those duplicates to create whatever shape you want. So maybe you want to, don't move the path, move the whole layer. Maybe you just want to surround someone or create a symbol with them and they'll randomly change shape on every frame. And we'll see later when we get to this folder that there are text options for this. Every character in the alphabet was already made using these scratch effects. Okay, the rest of these, you've got lots of straight lines, some circles, and then just a bunch of scribbles. These are all shape layers, so they've got paths, and you can edit the paths if you want. These two use animated textures, so you can swap them out with another texture if you want. Change the shape by editing the mask. This one uses the scribble effect. You can customize the scribble. All right, we made it to the last folder, text and titles. This first option, creation title effects, I have in there that it's the quickest option. Let me show you why. You've got a bunch of different looks in here. Most of these are animated. These are quick because they're just text layers. That means you can edit the text with your text tool and you can change the font to whatever you want. You just need your character window open. So these all come from the creation title effects template. That one has 200 animated titles. In here you can see we've got 12. So if you want more options, you can always go get that template. They come in really handy if you use text, which if you're in motion design, you do all the time. Of course, you've got all the customization controls for the color and the stroke and whatnot. And you can just copy these layers into your comp. The most important thing to know about these, if you scale down the font size too much, they're going to look different. And if you scale them down with the layer scale, same thing. So the best way to scale them down is to use, again, the transform effect. And I've got one in here. It's the last effect on each of these layers. So whatever you got to do, whether it's rotate or scale or move, do it in here. All right. I knew I would need some handwritten characters. That's what's in here. I think I'll hide the footage. So if you play it back, you can see that they change in every frame. With these, there are 5 variations of each letter. And we've also got numbers and all the major punctuation or special characters are in here too. So to create some text in your comp, all you would do is copy all the characters that you would need. I'll just, we'll write hello. So capital H, little e, hold down Command or Control to select multiple layers. I'll just do the L once and then we'll duplicate it later. Oh, and copy them. And I'll go in here and paste them. I'll duplicate that L. So what I recommend is that you make all your changes on just one character first. So you go to the controls, so you can choose the amount of variation that you want. Also, you can scale it down to the size that you want. And once you're satisfied with it, then you can copy and paste the controls to every other layer. That's going to be the quickest way to do it. So I can just select stop motion controls here and then select these other layers and paste. and all that information will paste over. I'll move that up there. And then the same thing goes with the transform properties. I'll just select transform, copy it, and then paste it to the other layers. Now we can just spread them out. These use the multiply blending mode. So if you want something darker, like here we can't see them at all, you can choose linear burn. And I mean, I probably wouldn't put them on that dark background, but I could add an invert effect and change this to add and get something like that. Let's go back to that comp. Let me double click one of these pre-comps. If you do that and you play it, nothing happens. All the different layers are in here, but there's no keyframed animation or anything like that. It's all done in here using essential properties. So if you expand the layer and look in this section here, we'll just scrub through and watch the opacity for each layer. They just take turns becoming visible. And the rate at which they do that is determined by the frame rate control on each layer. And it's best to make the frame rate match the frame rate of your comp stop motion effect. Okay, let's go to magazine characters. I knew as soon as I decided to make this template that I needed this effect. It's a ransom note effect or magazine font effect or serial killer effect. I don't know, whatever people call it. These were all cut out from magazines. There's at least 5 of each character, sometimes as many as 10. And just like the handwritten characters, they change on every frame, and you can set their frame rate to change the speed. Okay, these next two painted characters and pencil characters, I'll open them both up. They're basically the same. The only difference is the controls have been tweaked on this one to make the stroke look more like pencil, and on this one more like a paint stroke. Also, these are uppercase and these ones are lowercase. But you can adjust the controls to get any kind of stroke you want. If you want something fat and bright colored like paint, you can do that. And you can see that these strokes follow the path, so you can change the shape of these by editing the path with the pen tool. And if you want to change the variation in the shape, remember we've got our wiggle path controls here. Again, you've got the numbers, letters of the alphabet, punctuation, and it's the same deal. Just copy and paste the ones you need. Again, just get the controls the way you want them on one character, and then copy and paste those controls to all the other characters. All right, I kind of teased these scratch characters earlier. I really like these. They run a little bit slower than the other ones. And I didn't put the numbers in here or all the punctuation, but it's easy to make them. If you go into the pre-comps folder here and go into this scratch characters folder, you can duplicate any of these. Open that up, and this is just those scratch layers that we looked at earlier. There's 5 in here, just arranged to look like a bee, so you can move these to create any shape you want or any character you want and duplicate them as needed. And then just bring that new comp that you made into your scratch characters comp and copy and paste the controls from one of these other letters onto that new layer. Okay, the last effect in the template, the title mashup. This is a really cool effect, but I don't need to say too much about it because I made a whole tutorial about this. This is actually a different template, the one that I made right before this one actually, and it kind of inspired me to make this template. But you can see what it does. It uses lots of different styles on different backgrounds, and to edit this text, it's really easy. You just unhide this control layer here and use your text tool. And you can change the font, and you could change the font size too if you wanted to. And then using the controls on that control layer, you can make further customizations like the size of the backgrounds or the letters. So again, these titles, and there's like 30 of them I think, these come from the Creation Title Effects template, and there's a lot of good stuff in here. And that's it. We've gone through the entire template. I couldn't show you how to use every effect because of time, so definitely read the comp instructions and the layer comments whenever you use an effect. And I'd love to see what you create with this. Tag Creation Effects or send me a link to your video and I'll share it on social media. Be sure to visit Creation Effects because I have a bunch of free downloads there that are super helpful if you use After Effects. Just go to the freebies page. And if you like this mixed media effect, you'd probably like Creation Art Effects. That's another After Effects template with a lot of creative looks for your footage in different artistic mediums. Or Creation Trippy Effects is the psychedelic version of that. It has a bunch of trippy looks for footage, as well as trippy animations and effects that you can customize. Some more good ones with different looks for footage is Creation VHS Effects for turning footage into a damaged VHS tape, or Creation Film Effects for turning your footage into an old film with a bunch of preset looks that you can customize, or Creation Glitch Effects to add custom controlled glitches to your footage. You might also want to check out Landscaper. That's a unique one that lets you build 3D landscapes in After Effects. And it comes with 30 finished landscapes ranging from beach to jungle to deserts to winter landscapes. And just recently I finished the Space Effects template. It's got black holes and planets and nebula and wicked cool sun. And another popular one is the Critter Collection series. It consists of 3 templates called Flocks, Swarms, and Schools. And they allow you to create very realistic custom flocks of birds or swarms of insects or schools of fish in Adobe After Effects. That's it for me, guys. Good luck on your animations and let me know what you think in the comments. And be sure to subscribe because I'm always releasing new templates and free effects or presets for After Effects users.